After more than a decade of leading Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was ousted by an Israeli opposition coalition. Netanyahu made a comment to legislators post-election, saying, quote, "We are witnessing the greatest election fraud in the history of the country. In my opinion, the history of any democracy," end quote. Joining me for his first United States interview post-election is Prime Minister's son and conservative activist Yair Netanyahu. It's great to have you with me today.
Thank you, Cameron, for having me.
Of course. So, from what you gathered witnessing the election process in Israel and the formation of the new government, why is it not legitimate in your opinion?
Well, Israeli system of election is very different than in America. In America, you have a presidential system. You vote directly for the president, and whoever wins form his administration for 4 years. Israel is very different. We have a parliamentary system made up of many parties, not just two, like in America, Republican and Democrat. We have something like 13 or 12 parties, and we vote for the party, and then those parties should form a coalition in order to get a majority out of the parliaments. So in the last elections, out of our parliament with 120 seats, the conservative party of my father, the Likud, received 30 seats, which is the highest amount. The next in line after him is the leader of the left-wing party, of the major mainstream left-wing party, Yair Lapid. He got 17. Now, who was appointed to the prime minister of Israel now is a person named Naftali Bennett, who won only 7 seats out of the 120. So my dad won 30 and he won 7 seats out of 120. Now, he presented himself during the elections as even more conservative than my father, more right-wing, more hawkish. But he agreed to a deal with all the left-wing, communist, most radical parties in the Israeli parliament to become their puppet prime minister, because with 7 seats, he doesn't control anything in the government. So the left-wing parties that didn't win the election and have only a minority of the parliament, together with this small conservative, so-called, described themselves as conservative, now we see they're not, of Naftali Bennett that have 7 seats, together they managed to form a majority to oust my dad. But what's even worse than that is that for the first time in Israel, they included in the government a Muslim Arab party that is the Islamic Brotherhood of Israel. You know, the Muslim Brotherhood of Israel supports terrorism, visit terrorists in jail that murder Israeli children and call them heroes, openly calls for the destruction of Israel and creating a Sharia Islamic country of Palestine on its ruins. And they are, for the first time in Israel history, are included in this government and have a veto of every decision in this government, and they could dissolve this government at any given moment. So Prime Minister Bennett and all the other ministers are completely hold in their hands of this anti-Zionist Islamic party, which is, by the way, a sister party of Hamas in Gaza. We just had a war with Gaza, with Hamas, which is a terror organization, according not just Israel, but according to the United States as well. So they are represented not only in our parliament, but also in our government.
And do you believe this may pose a threat to Israel's democracy?
Well, we already see that this government, because they know they don't enjoy the public support. Right now, Bennett's party in all the polls don't even pass the threshold to get inside the parliament. So he's so small, he don't even the 7 seats that he won in the last elections by fraud, by promising he's more to the right of Netanyahu. So this is a very dangerous government that don't enjoy the public legitimacy and public support. And we already see they're planning to legislate very totalitarian laws to make sure that the head of the opposition, who's my dad, won't be able to run against them.
Spoken about the Israeli media being very against you and your family. Do you believe the media had an impact on the election?
Well, the situation with the media market in Israel is really horrific. All we have is 2 channels that one of them is the equivalent of MSNBC and one of them is the equivalent of CNN, only 10 times more radical. And really it looks now, since the formation of this new government, like the North Korea television with report on their government. There is absolutely, they were killing my dad for all these years and really doing shameful things for him, and not just for him, for all the conservative population in Israel, and mocking conservative voters, etc. in Israel. But they always said that they're doing it because the media role is to criticize the government. And lo and behold, now there's a new government, the most radical left-wing Islamist government in Israel history. And suddenly the role of the media is not to criticize the government, but to criticize the opposition. Now, they're only singing praises for this new government and their puppet prime minister, but they're attacking nonstop the opposition and the head of the opposition, which is my dad. So it's very strange. What is their excuse now? And it's a big problem in Israel. It's really radical, one-sided media situation here.
Ending on a more positive note, what do you think your father's greatest achievement during his term is?
Well, the most recent one is making Israel the only country in the world to overcome COVID-19 from his personal relationship with the CEO of Pfizer. He managed to bring all the vaccines Israel needed, and Israel is the most vaccinated country in the world. Every adult in Israel above the age of 17 that wanted to get a vaccine was able to do so months ago, before the rest of the world. And we are the only country that's completely vaccinated all our adult population. And we're the only country that have no masks anymore, that life has been back to normal like 2019. Concerts, stadiums, restaurants, everything is open without any limitations and without any lockdowns. So I'm very proud of that. And of course, I'm very proud of the 4 peace treaties he made together with President Trump, with 4 Arab countries for the first time in Israel's history. Peace for peace, not peace for land, not peace for giving up on our essential assets, just peace for peace, real warm peace with the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. And of course, he transformed the economy of Israel from socialist, almost communist economy with very low GDP to one of the most prosperous and wealthy and capitalist and open market economies in the world. Our GDP per capita surpasses now France and Japan, and it's on the Bloomberg rated Israel's economy as the top 20 in the world. He also have a very strong achievement together with President Trump, moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the American recognition of the Golan Heights.
Thank you for shedding light on that. Yair Netanyahu, son of former Prime Minister of Israel. Thank you for joining me on One American News. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.